Unmute myself. Thank you, Mary Jean, and welcome to all of you, including my alternate tonight. I'm glad if I get feel a little faint or I'm starting to bore everyone, I'm just going to turn it over to the other Susan. This is terrific. It's really fun to have another. I'm afraid there is a surplus of Susan Scotts on the planet, so we have to acknowledge that as well. Before we sort of move into the formal part, I would love to invite all of you to enter into chat the traditional territories that you're on. If you have names for those wherever you are on Turtle Island, if you want to acknowledge that, that would be most welcome. I'm speaking to you from the Great Lakes region of Ontario, Canada, and this land that I'm on is called the Haldimand Tract. And this was land that was traditionally belonged to the Haudenosaunee peoples, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral. And it was land that was promised to the Six Nations. So we're very mindful these days. Part of the work we're trying to do in settler community is be mindful of these histories, these complicated histories. And as we move forward and search for models for justice and mercy and community. So I invite you to do that in chat and we'll get started. So as Mary Jean said, this is the life writing, spiritual life writing. I'm the instigator behind this. This is, some of you on this call will know, this is the genre that's dear to my heart. I seem to be happy to be a champion for this because it's a beautiful, often underdeveloped mode of writing for many kinds of people. And yet it's a kind of natural form for us to move into if we want to explore what it means to be deeply human and to connect our experiences with the profane and the sacred and bring them all to bear in the same place. So these webinars, we run them for an hour. They always spill over a little bit. So for any of you who are new to this tonight, I every month have a special guest, or there might be a new host who's taking care of things for me, as what was the case with Lana Cullis last month. But I invite a guest in as someone probably you might not have a chance to connect with in any other circumstance, a distinctive Canadian voice, someone who's working in this genre, who's passionate about this kind of work and who connects really well with people. And so we just talk. The guest and I converse, and then she takes over at some point and leads you in a favorite writing exercise to bring you deeper into connection with your own story. And my guest tonight, Sheniz, has a beautiful, especially beautiful way of bringing people to writing, and you'll see what that is when we get a little bit closer. So I'd like to introduce Sheniz. I'm going to read a bit about, read her bio, and then if Mary Jean would highlight Sheniz, that would be fantastic. So Sheniz Janmohamed is a poet and writer based in what we know as Toronto, with ancestral ties to Kenya and Kutch, India. She's an artist educator and a nature artist. She visits schools and community organizations to teach and perform, and she centers creativity and collaboration in her practice. Sheniz has 3 poetry collections published by Mwenzi House: Bleeding Light, Fire Smoke, and most recently, Reminders on the Path. And Sheniz, I hope to be able to see you so we can talk. Where are you?
I can see you.
Okay, there you are. There you are. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad you deigned to put everything else in your life on hold tonight and spend an hour with us. And I have to say, you and I have this beautiful kind of glancing connection, like off and on, these beautiful things. And most recently, it was that the piece that you wrote, How to Write in a Broken World, that was the creative keynote that you delivered when you were writer in residence at University of Toronto Scarborough campus. And when I read this, I think did you post this on Instagram or the opening or something about it? How would I have read that? It must have been Instagram.
Yeah, I posted an excerpt on Instagram.
Okay.
And then you kindly followed up
on it.
I was hoping that would happen. So thank you for that.
Well, it was so beautiful. So here's the opening line. I have to read this so everyone hears this. it's impossible to speak of the creative life without speaking to the moment we are living in, without speaking to the unbearable beauty and pain coexisting in this very second and the next. What does it mean to be an artist, to be a writer, if not to embrace our humanness? That's just incredible. It's just really beautiful. And that's your starting point. When I read that, I thought that just sounds exactly like you. And you're able to take people to those places where they can, look at those questions, contemplate them, and then imagine their way into answering it. So do you want to talk a bit about that? Just how that works for you?
Yeah, I had the gift of being the writer in residence, as you mentioned, at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. And one of my responsibilities was to work with students on their own creative writing projects. And luckily, I've had the gift of being an arts educator for, wow, I can't believe it, over a decade now. And so I've been working with students of all ages for many years. And, I know that there's so much more happening behind the page, beyond the page. And so often in these institutionalized spaces, we focus so much on craft, and yet there's this humanness that is begging to be noticed. There's this need to kind of reconcile with what's happening in one's life, and not as a distraction, but as something to be embraced as part of the process. And so that's been my work as an arts educator, and working with students closely through the residency program. We were just talking about the challenges they were facing in the pandemic, first of all, being isolated, and then at the same time having to find their creative well springs, and yet at the same time having these responsibilities within and outside of school. And so, you can't really separate, at least for me, you can't separate writing from human experience and lived experience. And so a lot of the time that I was working with them, we were talking about other things beyond their writing, and things that they were having challenges with, or they were engaging with, confused about even. And I began to just model, or my practice has been modeling vulnerability.
Okay.
So, saying like, yeah, I don't know either, or like, because there is a sense of like, oh, I should know. I should have some sense of authority, or why is that? Why is it that we can't just sit with our humanness when we're speaking with another generation, a younger generation, and say, yeah, I don't know, but here we are. Let's keep showing up, even with this beauty and this brokenness. And we don't have to make either of them go away or stay. They can just sit together
and sit with that. So that keynote then grew directly out of your experience with working with everyone that over that period of time. But it's also kind of natural for you, I think, right? I mean, you've been able to combine your writing, your arts practice, and your sort of spiritual orientation in a really distinctive way. I mean, in a very, and it presents as very natural. But maybe just take us a little bit behind the scenes then, and just talk a bit about your life, and even if your heart, if you're okay talking about that too. I feel like that's a big part of it's a big character in your life story, right? The heart, and it's just beautiful. Wherever you want to take that question, Sheniz.
Yeah. Well, I often say, I was born with a broken heart, and maybe we all have in some way been born with a broken heart. But for me, quite literally, I was born with a hole in my heart. And I had many surgeries at a very young age to fix or repair the hole, but then also my natural pacemaker wasn't functioning properly. So I had to have an artificial pacemaker. And for those of you who might be familiar with pacemakers, they don't last very long for young people. So, you use up the energy in the battery very quickly. At least I did when I was a kid. So these surgeries would happen every 3 or 4 years. And every time it happened, I would have to just brace myself and come to terms with, I guess, mortality, even though, it was a very routine procedure, just the evasiveness of it. It kind of interrupted my childhood in ways that, I forced me to kind of ask difficult questions at a younger age. So, I remember, actually, I don't remember, but my mom told me, I came to her one day, and I know you're familiar with the story. I came to her one day with a drawing of my heart, and it was colored black.
Wow.
With a black crayon. And I said, why is my heart bad? And she didn't know how to answer the question. So she just directed me to many traditions, faith traditions, from Sufism to Buddhism to Hinduism, just like all the possible origin stories of the world that allowed me to kind of find my place within them, which, I'm so grateful for, because she could have easily just, found a way of silencing that, or, it's a painful question, I think, for a mother to hear. And so,
oh, it is.
yeah,
That's extremely painful. I know. Yeah. I'm amazed
yeah.
you responded that way.
Yeah, there could have been a number of other ways she responded, but giving me the choice to find that answer, I think, was the greatest gift. And I still don't have the answer.
Newsflash.
How?
You don't have the answer. Yeah.
And so what? And I go back to Rilke and that quote of like, live the question.
Live the question.
And then you might find your way into the answer. And so that's it. It's just like returning to the question, but through the lived experience of it.
That's incredible. That's beautiful. And I love that whole story, that connection with your mom. How old would you have been at the time? Do you know?
I think I was 6 or 7. Yeah.
6 or 7, right? And she's like, oh, let's check out Sufism. Oh yeah, let's talk about.
Well, there were children's tales, there were the children's
yeah, no, there's beautiful. But for that to be that kind of response to that, to a child who feels that her heart is bad and has drawn the black heart, for that to be the response, which is essentially invite you to imagine yourself into all these worlds and take up your own questions and let your heart take you where it goes, and not to want to fill that space up from a fear place. That's really an amazing thing, I think, that she did, because I can tell you the parental response, the normal parental response would be a place to react from a place of fear, or wanting to banish what you think is your child's fear with something really concrete, and that will take it away. But yeah, so she helped create or make it okay for you to create these places where you could wander. Then your imagination could go, your intellect could wander, your affections could wander, and you could find your own place in the world without having to be afraid. That's how it looks from the outside to me.
Well, it's even just, I think, like, if she had said to me, oh, your heart's not bad, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have believed it.
Her.
Like, what
right.
It is, why do I have to have, you know what I mean? These are unanswerable questions. And so instead of just kind of like neatly tying it with a bow and making it go away, it's like, I don't know, let's find out together, or let me give you what you need to find that answer yourself.
That's beautiful. That's incredible. Okay, so you had this incredible foundation alongside this, lived experiences and this embodied. I mean, You don't take your heart out at night and set it on the table beside you and check it out, in the morning. Like, that is you. That is who you are, right? This is your lived experience. This is your experience of heart. And heart being the most powerful metaphor for what it means to be human, right? So I feel like you are one of those people who's really explored this in a really incredible way. And it's led you in these interesting directions. So now talk a bit about where you're at, how you found your way into connecting with nature and art and poetry. Of course, we could be here all night, Sheniz. I know I don't want to make you do that, but I just want people here to understand, you have this holistic blend and these things that you navigate really beautifully. So insofar as you can find language for it, and then you can then you will turn right over to where you want to take us next. But just touch on those things if you could.
Yeah. So, when I go back to those early childhood days, I spent so much of my time outside, and being in nature and making these, I used to make these, stews out of rocks and twigs and mud. And I was just very connected to the earth, as I think many of us can attest to, right? In our childhoods, that was part of our childhood. And somewhere along the way, I lost it. I lost that connection. And it was when I was kind of coming up in my writing practice, and I was in university and I was doing open mics and I was performing a lot and I was getting my work out there. And slowly, I started to notice this perfectionism take over. This sense of like, this has to be really good or I can't even write it, And so at one point, I was working on my second collection, and I would just sit in front of a page and not be able to write, because it was so debilitating, this sense of needing to be perfect, that I couldn't write a thing. And so I started to go for walks in nature, and I just began to pay attention in ways that I hadn't in a long time. And I would notice, a fallen leaf, like an imperfect fallen leaf or a bruised petal, something that actually wasn't perfect, that nature was offering. And I would make patterns out of them. So these patterns that I don't really know what the purpose was. I don't need to know, but in that moment, I needed to attend to that. And then I would take a photo and leave them there for someone else to discover, for the wind to blow away, for dogs to trample. I used to make them in my grandmother's garden in Kenya. And I remember like painstakingly making this one piece, and then the next day the dogs would just trample right through it. So there's impermanence for you right there. So yeah, and so then it really allowed me to return to the page without that need for perfectionism. And that practice developed on its own. So at first it was just a complementary practice to my writing, and then it became its own practice. And so I started to make nature art, where again, it was what nature had already, I guess you could say, discarded. So, I don't pick flowers or leaves. It's whatever is discarded or found on the ground. I would make these patterns, take photos, and then leave them. And then that practice kind of developed also into sand art. So now I work with sand as well. So yeah, it's become its own practice, and it's just a reminder in a very tangible, visceral way for me to touch impermanence.
Okay. To touch impermanence. That's beautiful. So no need to check into a monastery to learn these things, right? It's girl on the path in the woods. Yeah, noticing.
Like right in life, right? Like right in the muck of it.
Right in the muck of it. Yeah. Just noticing and then finding a way to respond or honor those things that you've found. Yeah. Okay. That's beautiful. That's amazing. And that's made a big difference in your writing life as well, then? You were able to, you got that second collection done, right? You moved on to the third collection. So you've been able to integrate, you feel like you've been able to integrate these lessons about letting go and moving on and not clinging to that perfectionism, or it's a
Oh, this is a lifelong journey.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's another very human piece. Yeah, lifelong.
yeah,
Okay.
I think we have, like, at least for me, I have moments where I can tap into that place and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can touch this impermanence or this imperfection in my writing. And there were still days, actually, it took me 7 years between books for a reason. And that's because this perfectionism kept returning.
Yeah.
So it's not that suddenly it just went away, or that I'm trying to will it or wish it away with this other practice. It's like, okay, yeah, oh wow, I'm human. I'm gonna have to keep engaging with this part of myself, and holding myself through it. And so that practice is a way of holding myself through it rather than trying to get rid of it, because I don't know, maybe I never will. Maybe that's not the point. But it's despite that, I'm still able to come to the page again and again, even when it's difficult, even when it's imperfect, even when I look at it now and wish I had done something differently. It doesn't matter. It's the showing up. It's the continuous showing up.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible because you've been able to kind of resist that classic sort of Western culture temptation to conquer the thing, right? And to be able then to put out your, shingle and say, yes, I've conquered it, and come find me, and we'll, and for $5, we'll work out a way you can conquer yours. So yeah, so you
maybe that might have been the more economical thing.
An alternate career plan, right? When being a poet and an artist isn't working for you.
What's that about?
Right, exactly. But yeah, so just the ability to go, this is a cycle, this is a very human cycle. We're always, this is going to return again and again. And how do I just respond to that each time that rises? And then you can do that with other people then, right? Because you recognize the same fears taking hold in them. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that, brokenness and beauty. It's like I don't know if I'm sure many of you have experienced this, where something internally it's really, really painful, and yet you can go out and the sun is just shining. It's almost as painful because the world is so beautiful, but inside there's something else happening. And it's like, how is it possible to have both of these experiences at the same time? But it doesn't, I think my work, or my efforts have been to not to try and reconcile them or make sense of them, but just to present them.
And just to present them. That's incredible. Okay, do you have a piece you'd like to read to us? And would you like to just take us on a journey? Where would you like to take us?
Yeah, so I was just going back to the title of my collection, which is Reminders on the Path. And so, you can interpret path however you like. But for me, when I was writing this collection, I was envisioning the path as something physical, but also through time and space. So it could be an ancestral path, like moving forward and back and present at the same time. But it could also be this physical path that we are walking on, whether in nature or in our lives. So there are multiple kind of layers to this path. So reminders can mean, almost like touchstones on the path, on the way, that kind of remind you that, okay, you're getting there, you're going in the right direction. And so a lot of those touchstones for me are in the form of nature, right? Reminders in nature. So a cardinal, for example, is a reminder for me, but also a starling. And so I have a poem that I would love to read for you, and then we can kind of explore our own ancestral reminders.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's called Grandfather. I'm just going to share my screen so you can all see it. Oops. Grandfather, he comes to me in a dream, in the flight of a speckled starling, wings as slick as oil, the sun's rays catching labradorescent feathers mid-flight. He sings in a language of twilight beyond this world. When I wake, I keep my eyes on the horizon, listening for a flicker of emerald, gold, blue, a sign that he is still somewhere out there, streaking the sky in the blotted ink of memory, in the hum of remembrance, a garbled song caught in my throat.
It's beautiful.
So that actually came to me when I was in Kenya in my grandmother's garden, and I just saw this starling for a brief second, and I don't know what it was, but I knew it was my grandfather.
Okay.
I knew it was just a reminder from him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I encourage you all, as we kind of, sit with our own reminders, to recall a reminder, whether ancestral or not, doesn't have to be, but a reminder for you that returns again and again. So starlings have come back to me again and again since that sighting. And the next poem I wanted to share with you, it's called Salt. So I went to Kenya a couple of years ago to interview my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And, I was prepared to ask all these questions and find out her story, because so much of my ancestral story is from the patriarchs in my family. Mm-hmm. So I went with this intention, you know what, I'm going to find out from my mother's side, my grandmother's side. And the first thing she told me is, well, I don't have anything to tell you.
Wow. And
so suddenly I was just faced with this inheritance. I realized that it's an inheritance that I also say to myself, like, oh, who's going to listen to this? I don't really have anything worth telling, or should I really tell the story? And so it stopped me in my tracks, because I could have easily judged her and said, like, well, of course you have stories. Why are you saying that? But at the same time, I'm like, I do that to myself. Wow. So, how do we kind of change this cycle of thinking? And so she eventually did open up to me, and she told me that my great grandmother left India for Kenya when she was 17. And she never saw her mother again. Oh my gosh. So just sitting with that, and these are the days where we didn't have any correspondence or way easily corresponding with family. And so just thinking that the last time she saw her mother was when she was 17, going to this new place to be married into a new family. Yeah. And she never saw her mother again. So this poem came from that. And actually I had this dream. I had a dream where I felt the presence of all my ancestors standing behind me, just thousands and thousands of them. And it was in Kutch, in the Run of Kutch, which is where my ancestors are from, in Gujarat. And it's a salt marsh for part of the year. And then the other part of the year, it's desert. And so just pay attention for you as well, for those of you who are listening or reading along. What are those reminders for you when it comes to your senses? So these are mine. Salt. Thousands stand behind me. Ashen statues bracing the wind, holding stillness like a vow. Bellowing saris, white shells against the moon. Starched turbans, white feathers against the night. A ghost light flickers with the Morse code of, we never left. I trace the dust of bloodlines, brow bones, and jawlines. We have broken the inked silk of the Run, crossing this terrain for centuries. What use is a map? Your heartbeat is the compass. The edge of my great-grandmother's pacheri is as sharp as the memory of her leaving. The folds of her mother's wrinkles pressed into the seams of her shawl. A pouch of cloves, shakar, daria, sewn into her sleeve. If I could plunge my hand into the ocean of that time, I'd dredge for what was thrown overboard, for who was left behind. I'd bring the salt to my lips to remember what forgetting tastes like. Great-grandmother, did you say goodbye? Did you know there would never be a return? A lullaby sung across generations, a pang of separation in the bones, a spoon of curd melting on the tongue, a growl rising from the gut. This is how we say goodbye.
That's an incredible piece. That's incredible.
Thank you. So with that in mind, I encourage you now all to reflect on your own reminders on your path. So what have you encountered in your daily life that reminds you of your connection to your ancestors? And again, ancestors can be biological or chosen, or that connect you to a deeper sense of knowing. So you can list your own reminders on your path. And I always like to start with the sensory. So smell, sound, taste, sight, touch, whatever your available senses are. And then of course you can get to the ephemeral or spiritual. So I would say start with that. And once you've done that, you feel like you have quite a list. You can start a write, and you can start with however you like, but if you'd like a prompt, you can begin your writing prompt with "Thousands stand behind me," or "If I could plunge my hand into the ocean of that time." So again, first just reflect on reminders in your daily life of your connection to a deeper sense of knowing or your ancestors, and then list those reminders from the sensory to the spiritual, and then start a write.
And Sheniz, what kind of time would you like to give us? What works for you?
I think we should, how is 12 minutes? How does that?
12 minutes. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Are you keeping track of the 12? Do you want me to keep track of the 12? Okay.
I track of the 12.
Okay. Amazing.
So just finish your thought. Okay, well, you're most welcome to share in the chat, or I think we'll have some time at the end of our session, but I wanted to move on and deeper. So we will get to this, but I thought we could go straight into the mandala making. So what is a mandala? A mandala comes from the Sanskrit word, which means circle. And it's a contemplative practice of letting the materials guide you. So you can kind of see a mini example here, but it can take many different shapes and forms. It doesn't always have to be a circle. Traditionally it is. So nature mandalas are used or made by using found objects, and either can be dismantled afterwards or left for others to discover, as I mentioned earlier. So just, when we get to that point, just allow the materials to guide you. Think of it as an intuitive practice for yourself. But first, I just wanted to walk you through a bit of a reflection or visualization. So if you're not comfortable at the moment, adjust yourself so you are. Maybe roll your shoulders back if you feel that there's some tension that's been building, or if you have sore wrists from writing so much, you can just roll your wrists a bit. And then just gently close your eyes or keep them down. And imagine that you are sitting at the center of a sacred place. This could be a place that you've been to or somewhere that you imagine. So again, just bring to mind a place that is sacred for you, real or imagined. And as you sit or stand in this place, pay attention to how the ground or maybe sand feels beneath you. Pay attention to the temperature. What do you hear? What can you smell? Taste? Touch? What do you see? What colors are permeating your bones? And as you sit or stand in this place, you begin to notice a circle of support around you. Your ancestors, chosen, biological, human, non-human, they have come to support you, to create a circle, an embrace. You can feel the love and acceptance reaching your heart. Let that feeling spread to your entire body, head to toe. Know that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, this circle will always be surrounding you, holding you, reminding you that you are not alone, that you are loved. Hold on to this feeling. And now this place that you're in with your ancestors, it begins to dissolve into a mist, a light, a color, shrinking down into the size of a pea. Imagine that you take this pea and place it in your heart. It's safe. And find your footing back in the room that you're in. Feel the cushion behind you or the chair underneath you. And slowly, slowly, gently, gently come back. Come back. So in your own time, take your time. Just take a look at all the objects you have in front of you. And it's okay if you don't have objects. Maybe you have a pen and a piece of paper so you can draw. And just create a mandala to represent what you saw, what you felt. And place an object or a symbol of you at the center. So I'm going to give you some time to just, let's say, I know we don't have a lot of time, but let's say 5 minutes. We can go over a little bit if you can. And just let your hands guide you. So it's okay if you're still working on your mandala. I'm just cognizant of our time and wanted to give you the next step. So when you are done, you don't have to force being done yet, but when you are, you can take a photo of it. And then if you choose to dismantle it, you can keep that central object or image. I like to keep them either by my bedside or my desk, just a reminder that you're supported, that we're always supported. So again, you can continue to make your mandala, just giving you the next step when you're ready. And then whoever would like to ask questions while we're still creating, you're welcome to. Okay.
That is beautiful. That's the most beautiful sequence of practices. And oh my God, it's just fantastic. So I know people want to talk. Let's see if we can find gallery. It's hard. And when hands go up, Mary Jane's good at identifying when people are